Hello everyone, this is your orientation to clinical. I hope that providing some detailed will help prepare you for your clinicals and that you're going to do a terrific job. So just as a reminder, you'll have 252 hours to achieve the following. You'll have 37 mandatory imaging procedural competencies, 9 mandatory patient care competencies, 15 elective competencies for a total of 61 competencies that you'll be performing during that 7-week clinical. You will want to be familiar with your exams and get the ones that you know signed off early, so that way you can spend more time learning the newer ones, maybe that you haven't seen or rarely performed before. Kind of like the Boys and Girl Scouts say, be prepared. One thing you'll want to do also is check your Blackboard course frequently for announcements. I would get in the habit, if I were you, of checking it daily. I'll be making announcements and updates, sometimes new clinical sites that may be available, so get into that habit. Prepare by reviewing and knowing your anatomy and positioning. Remember, you're an advanced placement student. You should be able to perform routine exams with very little supervision needed. Remember, when you arrive to clinical, behave as though you're a guest in their house. The imaging staff there at the hospital know that you already have some working experience performing x-rays. They also are aware that there may be several exams that you've never seen before. So don't worry. Just do your part and be prepared to answer questions they may have. Many of our sites will like to quiz you on the anatomy, and then sometimes the pathology that you see on the imaging. So do your part. Don't look like a deer in the headlights. You know your anatomy, so be prepared for that. Some reminders from the JRCERT, which is our accrediting body, that a student is to perform an exam under direct supervision until competency is achieved. A student may perform an exam under indirect supervision once you've achieved competence. And what that means is, first of all, a qualified technologist is defined as a registered technologist with at least 1 year's experience. Indirect supervision is defined as a technologist in the immediate area should the student need assistance. Now, all of your exams, the first time you perform them, will be under direct supervision. That means that registered technologist is in the room directly observing you. So even if it's a chest x-ray, you could perform them in your sleep. When you get to that clinical site, they will watch you at least once until they say, oh yes, the student's good to go. They can perform that adequately and I don't have to be physically in the room. But that's going to be every exam until you get what we call signed off or determined by your technologist that you are completely competent. The indirect supervision, that means that the technologist is in the area, and if you run into trouble, you just call out and they will be in range where they can hear you. They can't be downstairs in the cafeteria having coffee. Or what we say in Texas, they need to be in hollering distance. So all you'd have to do is call out and they could come running and help you. So some more reminders from our accrediting body is any repeated exam must be performed under the direct supervision of a qualified technologist. So if you have to repeat that chest, it was clipped, whatever, the technologist has to be in the room observing you. Also, a student is not to hold a patient during a radiographic exam. The patient's caregiver or other medical personnel should hold if necessary. Some of the expectations for clinical, the patients you will encounter at the hospital are going to be very different from those in the outpatient environment, perhaps, that you're used to. Patients are more critically ill, so you'll need to be alert to any physical or mental status changes and fall risks. I always say keep the yellow light on, that any patient at any time can fall, suddenly code, lose consciousness, etc. As a result, you're going to need to be more familiar, if you're not already, with supportive patient care equipment such as oxygen tanks and IVs. You're going to be going to a full-service hospital for your clinical. How does that differ from where you're working right now? Hospitals are going to have digital imaging equipment. They will have many different types of patient care supportive equipment. So start becoming familiar with those items right now. So some of them will include, again, digital equipment. They may have different manufacturers all in the same department with different little idiosyncrasies. So I always say it's like you're used to a Ford and now you're sitting in a Chevy. Maybe the blinkers and washers are in a little different place. So do your research. YouTube is a terrific resource for you. So take full advantage of that. You're going to have fluoroscopy in the department. Again, become familiar with that too. And look it up ahead of time. Your hospitals are going to have mobile equipment, we also call portables. The image you're looking at there is a fully digital portable that you're going to see there. Quite often our patients are too ill to come to the department, so we need to perform the imaging at the patient's bedside. Likewise, we have mobile fluoroscopy equipment that's used in surgery and sometimes in the emergency room. It's called a C-arm, as you can see the letter C there, the mobile fluoroscopy equipment, or some of them are called O-arm. Also, it's a great idea for you to review the sterile field awareness video in your patient care class. And also, I have linked that video into your clinical course. Review that before you go to clinical and recall what is and isn't sterile when you go to the surgical suite. You're going to see equipment such as image receptor holders for holding the image receptor. You're going to see things like grid adapters that's you might be using portable or on cross-table lateral or tangential images. You're going to see also pediatric immobilizers. There's several different types. Again, look at them, and you can even do a Google search. Emergency crash carts. You may have these in your imaging department. You may not. It's not necessarily that you need to know all the medications and whatnot, but you will need to at least know the equipment on the top, such as the defibrillator and some of the suction units. The imaging room will also have what we call wall gases that have piped in oxygen, air, and suction. Here is an example of a suction and a portable oxygen tank. So again, you'll need to look at your patient care book, your text, and become familiar with the different parts there. Your pulse oximeter, again, measures the oxygen saturation rate as well as the pulse for the patient. What your part in this is to need to be aware when it is okay to take the patient to the department or when the exam should be performed portable by patient's bedside or when they're too critical. A patient positioning in the hospital is going to be very different than the outpatient environment. So how would you be able to perform those positions on a patient who is unconscious or cannot cooperate? What about that patient that's connected to multiple life-saving devices, such as that in the ICU? Think about this. When you're at your regular place of business and you're performing different projections, think to yourself, how would I perform these same projections if the patient was completely unconscious, maybe a trauma, and couldn't cooperate? What alternate views can I take? I would recommend that you go into your Merrill's textbook, Chapter 13, under Trauma Radiography. Again, just one of those little scenarios you want to kind of play in your head. How would I do this on an unconscious patient? Before you go, please become familiar with the area that you've been assigned. Perform an internet search. I have provided you the email address of the student who was there before you whenever possible. A former student can help provide details of the site and surrounding area from a student's perspective. Also, go to your Blackboard course for clinical, go to the link for resources, and then follow the clinical sites. Find your site and take a look at the information that I posted there. Many of your sites have provided their protocols or their list of routines. Become familiar with those before you arrive. A good idea might be to print them out and put them in a binder where you're going to start coordinating all your activity. So here's what that looks like when you go to your Blackboard course in clinical. On the left column you have all those choices, and you go to resources, and then that'll bring up that page. And then if you'll go to clinical sites, all of your clinical sites are listed there alphabetically. You will have also your clinical instructor's name, their phone number, and their email. What might be a really professional thing to do as soon as you find out where you're being assigned is to reach out and just send them an email and say, hey, Miss Steele, I've been assigned to your hospital. I'd like to introduce myself. Here's my name. Here's my imaging experience. I look forward to working with you. Is there anything you would like for me to know ahead of time? All right. So again, that is just an overview, and I'll have a couple more videos with a few more details the closer you get to clinical. All right. Thanks.